Hi, I'm Emily Johnson, and this is my Me in Action Research Module 1 presentation. So I am Emily Johnson. I have a Bachelor's of Science in Elementary Education with an emphasis in ESL from Kansas State University. I've taught 6 years so far. 4 of those were in a parochial school in Topeka, and then the last 2 have been in a public school in Topeka. And I've taught 2nd grade for 5 of those years. And then last year was my first year teaching a new kind of role as a STEM specialist teacher in the grade bands of K through 3. So I work for USD 345 Siemens Schools in Topeka, Kansas. Like I said, I'm a STEM specialist teacher. And so once a week, my K through 3 classes come to a program that our school district has implemented called Project Lead the Way, PLTW. And actually in this position, I travel to 3 different schools within the district, and I get to kind of dive into those science, technology, engineering, and math concepts through this program. So it's pretty fun. I really, really enjoy it. And then personally, I'm married to my husband, Mark, for 3.5 years now. We have 2 daughters. We have Maisie, she's 2 years old, and then Millie was just born in February, so she's 3 months old. We also have a golden doodle named Thea. I'm originally from Hayes, but I currently live in Silver Lake. I enjoy attending all of my husband's coaching activities. I love to cook and bake, go traveling, play with my daughters, hang out with them, watch them develop and grow. But I also love doing a lot of creative projects. So that could be a variety of different things. I just like to get creative and kind of do fun projects. I love to teach all of those subjects, being an elementary teacher, but I especially love teaching those science concepts in my role as a STEM teacher. And then I also like to throw in a splash of creativity with some art too. So let's dive into action research. So the term action research has captured the notion of disciplined inquiry. So that's research, and then the context of focused efforts to improve the quality of an organization and its performance. So that's the action. And so as a teacher with action research, you get to be both the participant and the researcher. So normally as a teacher, we're the participant of research, but for action research, we actually get to do the research in our classrooms and then also be a participant. So I think it's really cool. It's a very personalized form of research. The purpose is to identify if teacher education impacts student outcomes. So looking at different teaching models or different teaching strategies to be able to really see with data-driven instruction that it is working, that the student outcomes are based off of those teaching strategies. So through action research, you're able to study the process of implementing these new teaching methods as they're working their way into the real life classroom. You get to consider issues and questions that arise in that course of implementation, and then identify what changes throughout the process. And it is a dynamic, innovative, and tied to your classroom, which makes the process more personal, which I really enjoy. The 4 main types of action research are technical, which is basically a facilitator-driven type that you go from a developed theory and a facilitator kind of guides you through that action research. Mutually collaborative, the researcher and the practitioner collaborate, and then the kind of guide is with the individual power for action. So you kind of come up with what you want to change, what you want to get better at, and then that guides you to possible interventions together as a collaboration. And then the enhancement approach and the participatory action research approach, I kind of like to think of as like a group effort. The enhancement one has the goal of raising collective consciousness, but the participatory action research is all about positive social change. So I really like this image that I put in here because it's kind of like who's turning the wheel? Is it just one person kind of getting it started, or are we all mutually collaborating together? What's our outcomes? Where's our wheel going? And different things like that. So it can kind of take you in many different ways and get started in many different ways. So the goal of Action Research is to focus on areas of growth within your classroom, your school. It can go as small or as big as you wanted to do it with, and you don't want to necessarily look at a deficiency, but as an area of growth, and then it gains a culture of inquiry and collaboration for teacher learning, and it identifies effective teaching practice that is data-driven to create more expert teachers. It enables teachers to gain a better understanding of their classroom context and so develop more appropriate ways of teaching without waiting for solutions from outside. So I like to think of it as it's more of an internal structure than an external structure. You're not being told, this is the research based on what we did. This is the research based on what I did internally in my own classroom. So the steps that you would take is to identify the problem and envision success. Where are we wanting to go? And then develop that plan of action, collect the data along the way, analyze the data, and form conclusions, modify your theory, and repeat the cycle and report the results. What I really enjoyed, or was something that I thought was very interesting, is that when we traditionally kind of research different teaching models and things like that, it's definitely kept to ourselves, or we attend a conference or whatever, and it's just for our own gain. But with Action Research, it seems to be like a collaborative effort where everybody gains knowledge and data and kind of that research so that the whole community can improve. And I really liked this graphic over here that kind of showed that you're planning, you're reflecting, you're acting, and you're observing all throughout the way. You're not just on to the next step. It's kind of a continuous loop and spiral of research, and it's all within your classroom. So the differences between traditional research are the qualitative research acknowledges the complexity of the classroom learning environment. So noticing that you don't have just the same old classroom as you did last year, or the same classroom as the town next over. You have your own complex classroom with their own complex ways of learning. And so qualitative research allows you to identify those, and you can adjust your curriculum, content, delivery, and instructional practices to improve student learning in your own classroom or in your own community. And the Action Research helps you implement that informed change, whereas traditional research or qualitative research can help us see that improvements or declines have occurred, but it doesn't necessarily help us identify the causes of those improvements or declines. I also like, again, to say that traditional research is definitely more of an external. You just kind of read what was already researched, and Action Research is more of your internal or active versus passive research. Common problems with Action Research is one big one that I thought of is just time. Everything kind of said it takes a year or more, or a lot of time to kind of collect that data and to really see what's kind of working in your classroom and identifying those student outcomes of whether they're achieved or not. But something I didn't really think about is the ethical reasoning of it. So you won't be able to account for all the dilemmas that you will face. It is perhaps more important that you keep an ethical mindset, that you remain sensitive to any matters arising which require reflection and resolution. So one of them is through power. You don't want to obviously kind of stand over students and tell them to do something. So you kind of have to let them decide on their own whether or not to be a part of this research. And then through gathering that data, the relationships and the data boundaries, am I trusted with this data to share it? And then, again, like I said, that time is definitely a problem that could arise because it happens over a long period of time. So my evaluation, Action Research can help my current teaching practices by being reflective on my practices in relation to how effectively I'm reaching student outcomes. It is more personal to my classroom and how I can effectively teach my students through data collection and implementation. So it's successful for impacting student learning and teacher performance because they can experience and model problem solving for students. And problem solving is directly related to the students and their learning for student equity. So where can we improve, and how are we going about doing it, and is it effective for our students. It revitalizes the whole learning community, both in classrooms and professional learning communities. So my critique: often I think teachers attend or are told to attend professional development opportunities, but then nothing is done or very regularly falls off over a period of time. You go, you're gung-ho, you try to implement it, you don't really know if it's working or not, you just kind of go with it, or you get rid of it. So I think the shortcomings of that come from the externality of those opportunities. So the research is presented to us instead of us experiencing and participating in the research ourselves. I see definitely a shift of education with action research within PLCs that a lot of school districts have adopted. Oftentimes, data is collected through interventions to see how effective it is in reaching student outcomes. I also like the idea of a school-wide collaborative action research so that findings are not just kept within ourselves, but shared within our learning communities that involve students and colleagues. Teachers often share what works for them in collaborations, but it is important to be backed by data. Suddenly, research becomes more personalized to our own experiences, where we can adjust, shift, and reflect on our own practices. So this assignment is aligned with standards because it is a community-driven research that focuses on what is working as best teaching practice. It promotes the well-being of student outcomes and teacher practice as mutually exclusive to ongoing learning and its effectiveness in the classroom. It is a way to collect data on teacher practice and analyze the data for further growth and revision. It's relevant to my own personal teaching experience because it helps me to be a better and more informed educator, allows me to be more reflective on teaching practices and how they are working within my own communities to then move forward or revise my teaching practices. I realize action research to be more of my own implementation of practices and how effectively they are working in my classroom and community, and just always having that reflective piece on my teaching. By implementing action research as a school leader, it will help to guide a collaboration, school-wide research to create better and more informed learning communities. It will create a more active instead of passive learning environment in both the classrooms and professional learning communities, and it will help to foster communities for growth and student-centered practices. And then those are my references.